If we want to learn more, we have to get off the Earth. We have to travel to the planets. When your grandparents were children, such an idea was still science fiction. People wrote books and articles about the idea of one day going to the planets, but there wasn't any way for it to happen. Back then, this is the most anyone had seen of a planet like Mars. This was as good as we had for understanding a planet, a photo through a telescope. But by the time your parents were children, we had rockets and computers. It was now possible to launch an unmanned spacecraft and send it all the way to a planet to take photos from up close. The first spacecraft to visit another planet and get close-up photos was this, the Mariner spacecraft, sent to Mars. Now keep in mind that this would have been the best picture we had of Mars when your grandparents were children. Imagine how excited the world was when we started to get planet photos like this. People were blown away. We've now sent spacecraft to every planet in our solar system, and so we have close-up photos for each one of them. For most of the planets, we've only sent spacecraft to fly up close, take photos, and perform scientific measurements. It's a whole other engineering challenge to actually land on a planet. But it's been done, starting with Mars. Here's the lander that was designed, which first had to be tested in the desert. That's as close to a Martian environment as we can get here on the Earth. And here's our first view from Mars. Mars's red color is because the rocks and soil are red. This turns out to be rust. The whole surface of the planet is very rusty. Notice the color of the Martian sky. This photo was taken when the sun was high at noon. The sky is a butterscotch yellow color, so unlike Earth's blue skies. We even have a little robot car driving around on it right now. Here's a photo that was taken recently by one of these robotic landers on the surface. Do you recognize that little star there in the sky? I can't blame you if you don't. You might not even be able to see it, but there's a speck of light there, and that's us. That's the Earth. Being that the Earth is the third planet from the Sun, it makes sense that we explored Mars first, because it's the fourth planet from the Sun. So Mars is closer to us than most other planets. But the planets aren't evenly spaced apart. Venus, the second planet from the Sun, is even closer to us. It's also almost the same size as Earth. That means it's an Earth-sized planet that's a little bit closer to the Sun than we are. Naturally, that made people wonder, was the entire planet of Venus maybe warm and tropical? Could this become the greatest vacation destination ever? Does it even have air? That would definitely make a vacation less enjoyable if there were no air. Even before we could send a spacecraft, we knew that Venus at least had an atmosphere. On very rare occasions, from Earth, Venus appears to go in front of the Sun. Remember, it's the second planet from the Sun, so from our orbit, it's possible for Venus to look like it's going in front of the Sun. We can actually watch this happen. So watch right here, and then in a telescope you see, with the sunlight behind it, we see this very thin layer around Venus. Do you see that? That's proof that Venus has an atmosphere. So it has some kind of air. It's closer to the Sun. What's it going to be like? Here is Venus from up close, as seen from a spacecraft we sent to it. By sending a spacecraft to fly close to Venus and take photos, we discovered that Venus is covered in clouds all the time. The clouds are so thick and they never break, you can't see the surface of Venus, which means that if you were on the surface, you can't ever see the Sun. It's always completely cloudy. The Soviet Union created this probe to be landed on Venus. Here it is before being sent. It contained cameras, as well as thermometers that would record the temperature and send the information back to Earth. What the probe found was that, far from making Venus shady and cool, the clouds trap in the heat. These thick clouds, combined with the fact that Venus is closer to the Sun, makes Venus hot. Very hot. Venus became the second planet that human beings sent a robotic lander to the surface, and the surface temperature was measured to be 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Go look at your oven. You'll notice it only goes to 500 degrees. 900 isn't even a setting on your oven. That's how hot Venus is. Here is one of the only photos we have from the surface of Venus. And we only have a few, because each time a lander has been sent, the longest it lasts is 2 hours, and then the thing melts. So those are the only two planets we've actually landed something on, Mars and Venus. Well, next up is Mercury. From Earth, here's the best we can see of the planet Mercury through a telescope. And when we send a spacecraft to it, it looks like this. This is the view from up close. We still don't know a lot about Mercury. It's the closest planet to the Sun and the smallest planet. But one thing we were surprised by is how much it reminds us of another, more familiar object. Do you see any resemblance to something you know? Mercury looks a lot like our moon. Both are covered in craters, and neither has an atmosphere. In fact, in this side-by-side photo, you almost can't even tell them apart. Being so close to the Sun, we think that Mercury probably reaches temperatures of 700 degrees in the daytime. But without any atmosphere, on the nighttime side, all the heat is lost to outer space, and so the temperature dips down to minus 300 degrees Fahrenheit. This makes Mercury the most extreme planet in terms of temperature differences. That would be a serious problem for us to deal with if we were to ever land there.